So we're going to kick off over here, and I'm going to go ahead to first share my screen with everyone as we wait for other people to join us later on. So we have a whole lot to cover today. One of the very first things I'm going to kick off with is introducing us to Azure and then AWS. And then we're going to look into management and infrastructure in the cloud. Once we go through that, we're going to look at some key items and details you need to know about Azure, such as what the Azure market and AWS market looks like right now, what the DevOps market looks like right now. We're going to take a look at some of the resumes, how it should look like, some interview tips, as well as, just some general know-how knowledge you need to be aware of while, if you so want to pursue the career in Azure or DevOps. So let's kick off with that. The very first thing I'm going to do is to share a PowerPoint slide. I'm going to do that for Azure as well as AWS. This typically is a guide that I use for students who get into the full training with us within the Azure field or AWS field or the DevOps field. One of the key reasons why I actually do most of my webinars in Azure Cloud, AWS Cloud, and DevOps, because these are the most popular classes. These are the classes students enjoy, joining, because it's not as hard. Me particularly, I've been in the Azure and AWS field. I've been in Azure field for about 10 years, AWS for about 6.5 years, and I've been in the software engineering, talking about front-end coding, back-end coding, API systems for about 16 years, as well as, database systems. So I've been doing this since 2008. Some of the few certifications I had, I started having them back from 2008. So personally, for me, my own fun part is coding, but over the years, I've extended my learning knowledge across different organizations and companies in the United States, from being a full stack software engineer. And by the way, full stack means, when you're talking about full stack in terms of software engineering, you're talking about being a front-end developer, beautifying code for the front-end development for users to see, using tools like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, Ajax, Bootstrap, and some of all these other fancy scripting languages, as well as front-end coding languages. And then for the back-end, coding in Java, C#, C++, using frameworks such as .NET Core and Node.js. Over the last 7+ years, I've also had a lot of experience in what we call mean stack development, which is using MongoDB, Express.js, Angular, and Node.js, which is just a more modern way for software engineers to write code for front-end and back-end, putting into consideration what we call application programming interfaces, which is called API. In the more modern world, we use what we call RESTful APIs. This is just a middleman layer between most web applications and a database, putting in much more enforced security between the communication of a web application and a back-end database. REST APIs are also very useful in terms of very complex applications within Fortune 500 companies to sort of help you manage traffic from the communication of your front end to all the way the database system. So it's more or less like a handshake between your client and your server side. And as well, I've had over 15 years experience working on back-end databases such as Oracle. I remember when Oracle first came out. I probably don't remember when it first came out. But so let me correct myself. When I started working with Oracle, so that was like Oracle 9i, and this was back in like 2008 or thereabouts. So Oracle 9.9, SQL Server 2008. And of course, as the world became much more modernized, we came to see other cloud database systems such as MongoDB, or rather I'll say Cosmos DB, DynamoDB for AWS. And then when it just comes to modern, I'll say document-related database systems such as MongoDB, which works with that main stack we're talking about. So pretty cool experiences, and we're going to, but that is a part, today's class is more or less, about the cloud and DevOps. So just wanted to give you a background of where I'm coming from. We started Stack about 2.5 years ago. It's been very interesting. We've had a lot of trainings. We're gradually going into Udemy right now as well too, and also just expanding other fields and areas, including mobile apps design, website designs, and so on and so forth. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty of things over here, okay? So the very first thing we want to understand, and I do understand that this class is a fusion of people who might have had a little bit of knowledge about what the cloud is, and some people who are just wondering what in the world is this cloud? Are they putting things up there in the sky? What is going on? You understand? So I'm going to try to manage that knowledge so that everyone is learning a little bit of something, okay? And I also have students over here. I have I think 1 or 2 students over here who are either currently in my full IT training for cloud or just recently finished up. So as I'm doing this, if you feel like you want to sort of partake, so some of the guys I'm talking to Coyote, yourself. So if you want to feel like you want to just display some of your talents, just definitely let me know. You can put it in the chat and send me a direct message, and we'll make that happen. Okay, so let's jump into it. So what exactly is the cloud? Now, before we move into that, right, I'm going to go ahead and expand this a little bit. Perfect. And, I'm going to move down a little bit. So before we jump into what is the cloud, typically some of the tools you can come across while utilizing or while trying to pursue a career or training in Azure Cloud are listed over here, right? So you've got your Microsoft Azure portal where you spend most of your time, managing cloud resources, administering cloud resources, deploying cloud resources, configuring resources, and so on and so forth, working with your infrastructures and working with your platforms in the cloud. Now, you also have this part where even though you're working in the cloud, you still need to work in a DevOps environment, sort of, to manage, especially when it comes to your platform as a service. Where do you figure out the codes that the developers have created? Mind you, the cloud has nothing to do with software programming or coding. However, you will work with other partners within your organizations or other team members within your organizations, such as the DevOps engineers and the software engineers, as well as maybe in some scenarios, your testers. Sometimes we call them the QA, quality assurance analyst or thereabout, or even the business analyst. And so when it comes to the platform as a service part of the cloud, you're going to see yourself accessing things like an Azure DevOps environment to figure out which repository you have to work with to deploy to the cloud. Pretty easy stuff. It's not that complicated. You also have other DevOps tools or DevOps tools like your GitHub, and then you also have things like Ansible, and then you have Terraform, which falls into what we call infrastructure as code, which is a very crucial part for DevOps engineers as well as cloud administrators or cloud architects. You also have some other DevOps tools such as Docker. You have Kubernetes, which is also a DevOps tool, but you can also see the likes of it in the cloud when you're working with Azure Kubernetes services. In AWS also too, we have what we call our Elastic Kubernetes services as well. And then you see some other tools here that are for cloud data systems, all right? So managing data within the cloud, such as your Azure Data Studio that enables you easily access your databases both on-premise and in the cloud. Now, here's a very important thing to note about cloud, right? Yes, this common concept called on-premises versus cloud. Now, what does that mean? It means before the cloud came about, people were already utilizing IT infrastructures as well as IT platforms within their companies and organizations. And so what this meant was that, give me a second. All right. So what this meant was that companies were mainly responsible for taking care of all their IT infrastructure, right? All of their computer servers, their deployment structures, everything was being taken care of from one sort of location that was not too far from many of these companies. Those are called data centers. When the cloud came through, the cloud started taking care of all of those infrastructures. So you have service providers that are called cloud service providers, such as AWS, Google Cloud, as well as Microsoft Azure, taking care of these resources so that companies don't ever have to manage or have those infrastructures physically. So think about it, you are at home, you need 10 computers. You don't need to have those computers physically. You can have just one computer, and then you can have the other computers in the cloud, which means they're in a faraway data center that you are not responsible for managing physically. You're only responsible for signing up with that provider and then creating those computers. And then all of a sudden, you have your 10 computers, and you can access all of those computers from just your one main computer. And so that becomes the cloud versus companies having to physically buy those 10 computers by themselves, place the orders. Once the computers arrive, they have to configure the computers. They have to pay for that location where they have the computers. They have to also pay for the manpower to also maintain and monitor those computers. They also have to spend a lot of utility costs managing those data centers, such as equipping it with electricity, equipping it with a very cold center system, which means pumping it up with air conditioning systems. Because once you have a big data center, it might not even have to be that big. But once you have a couple of computer servers all seated together in a room, they need to be cooled very well for them to continuously work without crashing or going through some sort of hardware or other type of situation or problem. And so that is the difference between the on-premise, where you're managing your servers physically, versus the cloud, where you're managing your servers, your networks, your platforms, every other thing, security, you're managing it in the cloud, courtesy of service providers such as Amazon, AWS, Google Cloud, and Microsoft Azure. And so we also have other tools here. And so that's why we mentioned the Azure Data Studio is a data management system that can enable you access your databases, both on-premises and in the cloud. The Azure Data Factory is an extract, transform, and load cloud resource within Azure that also enables you to manage ETL processes, especially in the areas of database management and data analytics. It also can work with other cloud resources as well as data warehouses. And then we also have the CLI, which is our command line interface, where we can create our cloud resources by just writing scripts that look like English spoken words. And so let's jump further to see other key things. We're going to skip this. This technically is the full syllabus I use with students I train fully for cloud. As you can see, within Azure, I have 10 critical areas that can be covered. Now, let me actually shed a little bit of light on this syllabus. Now, typically, this syllabus cuts through 3 different levels of your progress within the Azure cloud. It looks at you learning from what we call a fundamental concept, where you can bag a certification that is called the AZ900, Azure Fundamentals. Now, if you're going to be doing that, you're not going to be too practical with the training. You can come in, hey, although I'm not trying to do anything too practical, I just want to have a good feeling of what Azure is. That's what the first level is. The second level is becoming a bit more practical with what you're doing and expanding a little bit into each one of these areas that are listed over here. Of course, the third level is being the expert. So typically, once you get to the training, the full training with me, you'll probably be at the first or second level. It's just extremely hard, through a 12 weeks training to just become an expert. So you have to start at the level 1 or level 2, which is even where most people start at and even end at. You understand? You don't have to be an expert. That's the beauty of Azure. And it's so very, very simple. So that is the breakdown of what you see going on over here, okay? And as you can see, this training is not like, I can even guarantee, it's not like any other training. It goes beyond the typical basic person that just says, so just come over here for training, right? We dig into things deeply. We go deep into infrastructure as code and DevOps. We don't just even settle on Azure cloud resources when we come to infrastructure as code. We go into Terraform. We go even into other areas. We cover Bicep, which is a more newer infrastructure as code. Of course, we cover Azure's own infrastructure as code, which is called the Azure Resource Manager. We also perform a lot of DevOps operation using GitHub, Docker, Git version control, as well as Azure DevOps. So very, very, very interesting stuff. You look at item number 8, we even go into database and analytics. At the back of the scene, what is really going on is that you're actually exposing yourself to not just Azure Cloud, but also being able to qualify for jobs within the DevOps field, which will give you that ability to not just say, hey, you know what, I'm only applicable to just cloud jobs. No, you're going to be applicable to DevOps jobs. You're going to know how to use Ansible. You're going to know how to use Terraform, Kubernetes. You're going to know how to use Azure DevOps. You're going to know how to use GitHub and Git version control. Now, I've listed about 5 to 6 tools. Now, if you join an actual full DevOps training with me, you're going to be exposed to double the amount of those tools. You understand? It's just what it is, because this is just an Azure training. There's just so much weeks, but we still put in that. So you're not getting 100% DevOps, but that 50% is dangerous enough, because those are the top tools that people are looking for, especially when you're within the Azure field. All right. So, and then you also have your database and analytics. Cloud analytics is a big deal. For some of us who understand the concept of data analytics, I think I did a SQL and data analytics free webinar last week, so you get to see how you can play with SQL, how you can create databases, write simple SQL queries within your database systems. You're going to work with other areas such as extract, transform, load using Azure Data Factory, then data warehouse using Synapse Analytics as well. So very, very, very interesting topics. Now let us jump into some more key things, okay? So let us take a look at this very briefly right here. So right here breaks down the different certifications I was talking about earlier, right? So, this resource is kind of like meant for my full students. So, typically I show them the breakdown of all of different types of Azure job role types. And then these are the different certifications. You've got your AZ900, which if I click, you're going to see it load up. So you can see here it tells you this is for a beginner. You can even prepare and practice for some exams. And it covers key, basic, simple things. Just compute, but I can guarantee you inside compute, there's a lot going on. To give you a glimpse of what that looks like, if I took you into the Azure portal in Microsoft Azure, we are looking at it right now. If I go into what I call more services and I click that, the cloud services are so much that it does not just belong to just the cloud solution architect. Within the Azure portal, you've got software engineers that has a space within the cloud for them. Hence, they also have their own type of certification that they can fantastically earn. We also have the database developers. We have the data analytics guys. We have the machine learning and and artificial intelligence guys as well. So it is not every category you see in here that is for the cloud solution architect. You understand? And to take a couple of years to want to dive into other areas. You understand? If you so care to, it's just a lot of unnecessary work. You understand? So in here, for example, we're looking at the word compute right there from Microsoft, right? So let's take a look at compute, networking, and storage. So if I go back in here to our Azure environment, I can see what compute is, and then you can just see all of the many items under compute. Even through my training, I don't cover all of this. I cover about 35 or 40% of them. The crucial part, one of the key and most important parts you need to know is your virtual machines, your availability sets, your virtual machine skill sets that is over here, as well as your images. Under the platform as a service, it would be critical for you to know about app services, as well as our function app, container apps, the environments they run under. And then if you remember, I mentioned Kubernetes a few minutes ago, we can see that provided here as well. Now, what is the difference between these layers? Technically, what's going on over here is something we call infrastructure which manages items that are actually physical in nature, as well as non-physical items that work to support this physical infrastructures. So if you're right here looking at this virtual machine, this is a computer machine, but in the tech world, it's called a computer server. And so you create this, but technically you're actually designing a computer, rather. And that computer could be a Windows computer, it could be a Red Hat computer for those of us that understand Linux, and it could be a Linux computer as well too. But over here, we have different types of Linux operating systems. We have a Red Hat, we have our Ubuntu operating system images as well. And so you have other things in there, such as your keys, your SSH keys, that secure keys that you can use to log into your virtual machine. So to not bore us too much, the platform as a service area over here is for deploying applications, managing applications that have been written in code, and you just have to come in there, click the right buttons to deploy those codes into the cloud. So they become what? They become live websites, like other types of websites you're going to see when you access your internet. And so that's pretty much what's going on over there. And then we looked at compute. There's also what? Networking and storage. Now, the networking has to do with things you can't see physically, but they sort of contribute towards other resources you've created in the cloud, such as your virtual machines. If I look down over here, I can see networking. Some key areas under our networking is something we call the virtual networks. The virtual networks, which is over here, enables our resources in the cloud to communicate with each other. It can also enable our resources in the cloud to communicate with what? The internet. Furthermore, when we want to privatize, or we want to privately secure our cloud resources within our organization to enhance security and keep our resources extremely private, we can use virtual networks alongside something we call private links and endpoints, or in some cases, some people call it private endpoints, to further secure our cloud resources within our organization, so that it is closed out to the world, but it is available to us what? Internally. So it's a lot of beautiful resources over here that work together to really boost what we work with within the cloud. Furthermore, we also have our network security groups. As we see over here, we have something that's called a network security group. Pretty cool stuff. Over here, you can set inbound and outbound traffic control to manage what can access what level of layer they have access to, what must be denied, what must be allowed, you understand? And what type of source you want access to. So we're not going to go deep into those, right? So that we don't get too confused. But from an high-level perspective, the network security group, just like the name implies, network security is providing a networking access that further enhances networking within the cloud environment and also supplies a level of security to those cloud resources. We also have other things like peerings, which is called virtual network peering, that connects two virtual networks together to, boost communication and to sort of make identical resources work together as one. So now, we also have that third layer we looked at, which is storage. And storage here is more or less just talking about cloud storage. How do you manage storage in the cloud? Now, this will look a little bit or sound a little bit funny, but this is almost identical to your Google Drive in the cloud. How are you able to store things you don't want to store locally on your computer to the cloud? So as you closely look at some of these resources, you begin to see that there are versions of things you would do physically or locally on your computer or physically within an organization, but now it is being taken a step further to be put in the cloud, right? To be managed in the cloud. And then you have to, you see them having all of these other key things like your security, your monitoring, and all of this other cool stuff, because all of these things have to come together to enable organizations manage their resources in the cloud once they are right there. All right. So that is just a typical example of seeing what you're looking at for a certification and then seeing the transformation of what it actually looks like in the cloud environment. And so over here, it will tell you you should have skills and experience working in areas such as this. Now, this is not really true. This is a best advisory detail, right? Saying, oh, well, you should have software development, but that is not necessarily true. You understand? But they just have to put this as a fail-safe guard, to say, oh, well, let's not just tell people you can't do this without this, right? Everybody has the background. Even me, I had my bachelor's in political science. Before I finished graduating, I decided this is too simple for me. I want to move out of here and jump into IT. You understand? So you technically don't need that. And that brings me into another discussion of what exactly does it entail, or what do you really need? What kind of skills do you need to get or want to be interested in cloud or DevOps? Well, I'll tell you this for sure. The greatest prioritized skill or background you need is your determination and willing to learn. You understand? So tech is not all about, oh, I'm not happy where I'm making money. I want to come in somewhere where I can make 6 figures comfortably without any shaking, because of course you're going to get that in tech. However, here's a caveat. Why is everybody not in tech? It's because it is not ABC. And so one of the key things, if you want to get into the cloud, even though it's not difficult, there has to be that willingness to learn, that willingness to want to challenge yourself. You understand? The willingness to know that you are not coming in here to read A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You're coming in here with a little bit of assignment for yourself. What is that assignment? The assignment to want to learn a bit more, to create time within your schedule to say, I want to practice. I want to further learn. The students in my class, they know. When they talk to me on the phone, they think it's like any other random training. Say, there's not much I can tell you. Once you get in, you'll see it. You might even be the one that will run away. You understand? I've seen people that come, oh, wow, that was good, but I think tech is not for me. And I say, okay, no problem. You understand? And then people will be like, they'll be challenged. So that is it. So you have to be, what your greatest skill is to want to challenge yourself. So if you're not willing to explore and learn, it might not be the best suited place for you. You understand? If you're not willing to troubleshoot something to see why it failed, click buttons, move them around, it might not be the best. If you're a nurse, you don't like touching computers, moving left and right, it might not be the best, space for you. So nevertheless, it's very, very easy, but there has to be that willingness to learn. Now, do you need an IT background or anything like that? No, you do not need that. You understand? It comes with that knowledge. It's not hard. If we're talking about an hard topic, I'll talk about software engineering, coding. That is slightly hard. And even with that, I've seen people do it easily. Even I myself, I'm the greatest storyteller of that, because I know I came from political science. I jumped into IT and I figured it out. You understand? And that was even 16 years ago. So the cloud is one of the easiest classes. Is the cloud, Azure, cloud and DevOps. They're one of the classes I have the most students. The one I would have loved to have a lot of students is software engineering, coding. But I know people don't like coding, and I get it. You understand? So it's very, very funny. Back when I first graduated, back in 2000 for my master's degree in applied information technology back in 2012, the company that recruited me and a few other people, they came in there, we all had IT backgrounds. And then suddenly they said, you can pick any field within this company. If you want to do software engineering, pick it. If you want to be a business analyst, do it. If you want to be a quality assurance analyst, do it. You won't believe it. The guys that had 3.9 GPA out of 4.0, 3.8, even the ones that had 3.8, they all went for business analysts. I was like, wow, you guys just betrayed software engineering. I couldn't figure it. But me, I said, I'm going to stay. And when the first project that kept me on was database. And then from there, they moved into software engineering with me. And that's how I started climbing the ladder. Years later, the company moved into the cloud. We jumped into that project and all. So, there are flexible fields, in IT, but it is a very doable, I would say, very, very doable course. You understand? So once you have that determination, you'll be able to do it. And the most important thing, you do not need an IT background. You don't need a degree in IT, right? Employers look at your skills and then you can further support that by this certification. Some of the certifications are very, very affordable. Like this one is just $99. And so as we look at that and we look at other key items, such as, and this is just my Instagram handle. So for anyone that wants to follow me over here, just look for me Instagram on, look at for ScarStack Solution. We're also always posting a lot of interesting things and very insightful information over there, right? So when we go back to our learning guide over here, we have the other advanced areas such as the AZ104. If we take a look at this, you begin to see that the details change a bit. You start to see the virtual networks that we just talked about a few minutes ago. You see the storage that was talked about and the compute. Now, why are they repeating it over here? It's because what they're expecting is that in the first level of certification, which was the one we just looked at a few minutes ago, even though we saw these two items there, when you get to this part here, they're expecting you to be able to practically implement this and go further with any other details in there, right? So it's like bringing you into the house. So the first certification is like, hey, this is my house, but you never take the person to the bathroom, you never take them to you never take them upstairs, you don't take them to the guest bedrooms to show around, you just show them the living room. Now, when you see the same thing repeated, it's like bringing in the same visitor and saying, well, the first stage you just looked at the living room, now we're going to take you a little bit deeper. We're going to show you the bedroom, this is the master room, this is the playroom or the game room, this is the kids' bedroom, this is the upstairs bedroom or, guest toilet and stuff like that. So you go deeper a little bit and become a little bit more practical. We also have things like security and identity, which covers securing your cloud resources. And then we have governance. What is this word governance? Everybody understands what a government is in a real life scenario. But then what is governance in the cloud? Governance just simply means Azure, AWS, or Google platform, either one of these cloud service providers provides you or your organization with governing tools you can use to govern your team members or users within your cloud. This could be an example such as managing costs, tools for enabling people to understand the cost of their cloud resources, giving people the ability to structure the management of their Azure environment from the perspective of creating different groups of what we call subscriptions and management groups. And so typically within a cloud environment, you have what we call a root tenant group. It's pretty much like your Wi-Fi system in your house. You are the ultimate user, but then if you have different guests that come around and you wanted to share with them your password, you say, I don't have to do that. I can just create another user account that says this one is just for friends. I don't have to necessarily give them this or that. So you use the governance to do so many things, but the objective of cloud governance is to mainly govern how people operate within the cloud environment. You can even tell someone before you create a computer in the cloud, make sure you choose this size for your computer. It's just like wanting to buy a computer on Best Buy. I want to buy an Intel 5 or Intel 7, or I want to buy an 8 gig RAM, I want to buy a 4 gig RAM. You can use governance to control that. To say, when someone is creating this type of resource in this region or in this folder, I want to ensure that they are not going past a size for that so that we can manage cost within our cloud environment effectively. And so this gives you a general understanding of what is going on within specifically this certification and our Azure cloud environment. So now that we've taken a look at that, we come to a third layer called the AZ305, which is a more advanced, so we don't need to even get here because you need to first get this tool before you can get that one. And so for you to take the AZ104 certification, you definitely need to take the AZ900. So with that in mind, let's talk about cloud computing. So with all of those practical views I've just exposed to you, what cloud computing here really means is that we're talking about being able to deliver services that are in the cloud to an organization or individual or even a government agency. Some of these cloud computing services could be a database system delivered in the cloud. The storage that we just looked at as well, which is having your storage physically in a computer, computer within a company organization, but now you have it in the cloud. The networking we just talked about, delivering the same type of networking that you'd have had physically within an organization, but now you have network in the cloud, controlling how things flow within the cloud, controlling what must have access, what must be allowed, what must be denied. You also have your servers, which are your computer servers, being able to create computer servers in the cloud, rather than having to buy them physically and maintain them. And so that's what cloud computing is all about. And so as we come over here, we'll see what we talked about earlier on premises versus cloud. We also have what we call multi-cloud computing, which is very, very, very critical. What does this mean? This means when an organization is talking about cloud computing, which many organizations practice a lot, they're talking about an organization that is basically utilizing different cloud computing services within the organization. So this could be an organization that uses Azure as well as AWS, as simple as that. As we go down here, we'll look at the cloud computing services. Now, this part is very, very critical. We have what we call the IaaS, which is the infrastructure as a service. We're taking a look at some infrastructure as a service some few seconds ago. If I go back to our Azure environment over here and I go to our compute, we'll see some infrastructure as a service. We'll see some platform as a service. And then we'll see what we call serverless and microservices computing. So these three areas are very, very critical. They are the three service layers of cloud computing, where some items are described as infrastructures, which is the first one, where you're working with things like your computer servers, the networking that enables communication and controls communication between those servers or storages, as well as database systems. We also have our platform as a services that focuses more on us deploying our applications that are in form of code, but then deploying them to the cloud so that they can become live websites. That process of picking them locally, transferring them to what we call an online repository. Now, what is an online repository? If I took you to somewhere that is called GitHub, GitHub, for example, is an online repository. From here, a cloud architect from his own cloud environment, such as our Azure cloud environment, can point to GitHub, which is an online repository, target a specific repository here. As you can see, I have about 50 repositories. And then I can target to deploy this, because this is all code. If I look into this, let me click on it. I can go into any one of these files here and I can look at the code. I can go into for example, I can go into the HTTP example.cs. Very short level of code. Each one of these files have some level of code within them. And so I can now, as a cloud architect, say, I don't care about what the code that is in this project is all about. My job is to point to this repository and deploy it so that it becomes a live website. It's as simple as that. So as we see that, we see there's a whole lot that is going on over there, about 50 repositories. You can see even from this layer, my repository is very, very busy all through the year. And so that is what the platform as a service is really trying to achieve. And it goes beyond just deploying. It also goes with monitoring. When you deploy an application, you need to monitor it during the process of deployment to ensure everything is going well, in case you have errors, so you can detect, debug, and investigate. And then even after any sort of resource, be it a platform as a service or an infrastructure as a service has been deployed, you need to constantly monitor those as well. In case they malfunction, in case their performance goes down, in case they need to be upgraded, monitoring is a very key part of cloud. And then finally, we have our software as a service. This is more or less a finished product that can be the combination of an infrastructure as a service as well as a platform as a service. And so our software as a service basically focuses on the delivered software application that has been completed that is now available either over the internet or on demand. And one typical characteristics of a software as a service platform is that it enables you to subscribe to utilize it. And so that's why it says this is used over the internet on demand, and it is typically based on subscription. And so it might now become a complete version of you having the infrastructures for your platform to be deployed upon, to be managed, and has now been deployed and can now be utilized as a software as a service. So you have popular companies across the world, such as Salesforce, Netflix, your Dropbox, and all of these things. They're all examples of software as a service. Things where you are paying for subscription online, and those services, as well as their resources, are being placed somewhere in the cloud. And so now that we have that understanding of all of this, we're going to come out of here a little bit and then jump into our Azure and AWS environment. Now, let's take a look at management and infrastructure within the cloud. Now, with management and infrastructure within the cloud, I'm going to take us somewhere within these categories to somewhere we call management and governance. As you can see, some of those keywords we're looking at either through the Azure certification or through our learning guide is being displayed to us right here. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. In here, I can see different types of resources. One of the key ones I want to mention is our resource groups. Our resource groups are used in managing cloud resources. It is more or less like a cloud folder. So if you ever opened your Windows computer, your Mac computer, you notice almost everything you work with is under one type of folder. Even if you store something on your desktop screen, it is still in a folder called desktop. You have your documents to put your documents, you have your pictures to put images, you have your videos folders, and I'm specifically talking about Windows computer because it's not that rightly structured in Mac. For most Mac, it's just a documents folder, some few other folders like your desktop and all of that. So the resource group in the cloud is used to do what? Is used to group resources together. Now we also have something that we call tags. So let's go and take a look at that. Let me click on this specific resource group. So as I'm taking a look at this resource group, it's like a digital folder, remember? But because we're dealing with the cloud, it has a lot of cool features. For example, I have 2 cloud resources in this resource group. One of them is called an app service. And what is an app service? An app service is basically a cloud service that can be used to create a cloud resource to deploy a web application and make it a live website. Now that looks like a lot of information, so I'm going to rewind back a little bit. As I explained that, I mentioned cloud service and cloud resource. What is the difference? A cloud service is a service within the cloud that can be used to create a resource. So if I'm going to cook rice right now, I need a service that can enable me to cook that rice so that it can become a real rice. And that's just what it is. If I want to create a computer in the cloud, I need to click on a specific service that will create that computer. Once that computer is created, it is called a resource. And so there you have it. You have your service that you click to create that computer in the cloud, and then you have that computer in the cloud that has now been deployed and is now called a what? A resource. Some other keywords we use in the cloud are provisioning and deploying. Provisioning simply means when you try to click on a service to create a cloud resource, you need to configure certain requirements. Take, for example, you want to create a cloud computer. You click on the service, in this case, for example, a virtual desktop. In Azure, we call it Azure Virtual Desktop or a virtual machine. You click on the service, and then it starts asking you a question. What type of operating system do you want? I want a Windows operating system. What is the random access memory? I want an 8 gig random access memory. What is the storage you want? Oh, I want 250 gig, 500 gig, 1 terabyte, right? Typical things that some of us that understand computers know when we want to buy a computer from Walmart, Target, or Best Buy. That process of configuring in the cloud what you want your computer to look like or any other type of cloud item is called provisioning. And with that word, the process of configuring that is called a provisioning state. And these grammars are very, very important to learn. Even some cloud engineers that call themselves, they don't even know it. So what's going on? We're in the provisioning state for the cloud resource. That is a banger. I was like, whoa, that guy knows what he's talking about. Provisioning state has now been completed. We're in the process of deployment. We'll let you know once it's complete. Thank you very much. You are speaking volumes in the cloud. So these keywords are very important, as well as on-premise versus cloud. You have to know what that means. So there's a lot of key knowledge to be learned about in the cloud. Once you start learning them, you start enjoying, even the name is fancy. And so in this case, if I were to look at this right now, this was a cloud resource that was deployed. And I can see all of the details for it. The website to access it is this right here. Now, this is an in-house service provider domain. What is a domain? Some of us already know what it is. Domain is simply you creating a website link that can be accessible from anywhere in the world, such as cnn.com and facebook.com. This can easily be called cnn.azurewebsites.net, but CNN itself is called cnn.com. What this tells us is we can actually create things within our Azure and deploy it to be available across the world without spending money on a domain at first. So what does that tell me? This is scarstack docker eclipse.azurewebsites.net. If I wanted it to be scarstack eclipse.com, because in this case, because we're using Azure, Azure takes care of our .com and gives us a free domain for us to use. And anybody in the world will still be able to access your website. Of course, when they look at it this way, they know it is azurewebsites.net. If you're an organization, you're not going to leave that way, except you are in a test or local environment within your organization. And that is why you now see another feature here that is called custom domain. So that when you guys are done and you like the look of your website, you can now add a custom domain to now put .net, .edu if it's an educational type of website, or .com. And then you can now work with other domain providers such as GoDaddy.com to complete that process. As you can see, my mouse, if I go down, I can see the same thing here. And so that's just a tip of the iceberg of what really is going on within the cloud. We also have other tools that can be used to monitor our cloud services. Because this is an application, if I go down a little bit, I can see our monitoring here. There are so many tools such as what we call alerts, metrics, and logs that helps us monitor. The alert can be set for different types of things. If I wanted to set an alert for the computer machine that this application is deployed on, I want to say, I want to know how this machine is performing. I can choose different types of things I want. What is the CPU operating unit of this? Is this virtual machine or virtual computer running out of space? I can set an alert that would alert me if things are going bad. We can use application insights because that guy is trying to struggle to load up. The application insights is another tool we can use to manage and monitor the performance of an application. This is an application that has been deployed over the internet. So we can monitor incoming calls, people that are reaching it. We can check the traffic. Wow, the traffic is bad. Oh, someone was trying to call an API system, they got an error. Things like our application insight, which is part of what we call Azure Monitor, can be used to easily monitor that. And so the same also goes for AWS. So let's take a look at AWS a bit. Now, if I switch to my AWS learning guide over here that I use for my students as well, and we go over here, we're going to see some of the cool tools over there. Before we jump into the tools, this is our syllabus, right? So when you take a look at this syllabus, you can just see all of the cool things, setting up your AWS. Now, practically my own trainings are very practical. So, it's not telling stories. When you come to the full training, you jump into real work. And so some of the things we do, they are very detailed. So over here, you come over here, you see setting up your AWS account is the very first thing. In fact, I can guarantee you the very first day, some of the guys that are here in this class, this free webinar right now, they know it. The very first day, I'm making sure that we're not talking for too long. You are going to create things. When you yourself go back to your bed and sleep, you'll be like, wow. Someone checks on you, I said, how was your day? Say, well, forget that. I just deployed some resources to the cloud. If that person does not know what is going on, they say, please explain further. So that is you understand, that is the agenda. So over here, you set up your AWS account. In fact, I even make sure students kind of do it before the class, but if you run into some issues, then first day of class, we look at that. It's because I want us to jump into action on the very first day. We'll look at getting started with the AWS console. Because in the case of the Azure, we call that the Azure portal. In Amazon, we call it AWS console. We start looking at the same compute. As you can see, whether you're using AWS or Azure, they use a lot of similar words. In some cases, they use different words, but they're achieving the same thing. So compute, you look at the virtual machines we're looking at in AWS is called EC2. We're just spending some time looking at app services. In AWS, it is called Elastic Beanstalk. We also have the case of Lambda over here. In Azure, we call this function app. And then we have some of our developer tools to help us with our platform as a service within the cloud. And then over here again, we see DevOps and infrastructure. We see AWS form of infrastructure as we call CloudFormation. And then we look at other third-party companies like Terraform, GitHub, Git, Docker, and Kubernetes that works alongside our cloud environment. Sorry about that. And so we have other key areas like that. But as we walk through the syllabus, we'll take a look at some of the tools and applications that you can expect to find or utilize within an AWS environment. You've got your Terraform, your S3 buckets, which is a version for storage. So remember, we're looking at storage in Azure. This is AWS form of storage in the cloud. S3. We see our AWS version of computer, infrastructure as code over here. Our virtual networks that we looked at in Azure, over here is called a virtual private cloud. We look at our Azure Monitor, and some of the monitoring tools within AWS is our CloudWatch. So with all of that in mind, let's move a little bit further. So you see, this is also introducing us to the cloud, making us know what's going on, what is cloud computing, who's using cloud computing, the benefits of cloud computing, and all of this other cool stuff. So with all of this in mind, it's just a lot. I can just keep scrolling down. So, this is for full training guys. You understand? So with all of this in mind, let us play around a bit. Let us create something. Because the class has a lot of people that are new to the cloud, we're going to do something soft and light, but yet cool and interesting. So we've taken a look, we've seen what the Azure environment looks like, So I'm going to create a resource group. Remember over here, we're looking at a resource group. We're going to create it in AWS. So right here, what is going on here is what we call a navigation mapping here, and we are in Azure right now. Within Azure, I'm looking at an app service that is described as a web app that has been deployed. It's been deployed on an operating system that is a Linux operating system. I'm going to take a step back by clicking that guy right there, and it's going to jump me into the resource group, which is the digital container managing this cloud resource. I can see I have two cloud resources. The application service, which is an handler for a code that has been written and is now deployed and is now available to the world. And we also have what we call the app service plan in here. That is the plan for the machine or operating system that Azure has deployed our web application on. Because that guy is deployed on a very light virtual machine or computer in a data center. And that has a plan. So that if you want to change it, if you feel like the computer is, you guys are now exploring bigger, you need more storage or you need more random access memory for a computer, you can use the app service plan to expand what you want for that computer. It's like you sitting at home and maybe you're a videographer or something, and now suddenly you have a lot of clients. And when you first bought your computer, you had just 200 gig of storage, but now you need 1 terabyte. If you even asked me and you gave me my laptop and you said, go and put extra storage there, I'm not an hardware guy. I'm a software guy. I will take that to a hardware office. But in the cloud, you don't need to touch anything physical because you're not dealing with them physically. You just click buttons. You know what? I don't want 200 gig. I want 2 terabytes. Just one button, boom, you have 2 terabytes. Of course, that comes with a cost, But you're not bothered about that because if you're doing it for an organization that needs 2 terabytes, they are making money. So that's how it goes. So this is the version of a resource group. If I was going to create a resource group, for example, in my Azure portal, typically I can go to more services, then I can go to management and governance, which we're still under over here, and I can click resource group. And then I can click the create to start creating that. Very easy. But we're going to do this in our AWS cloud environment. So to do that, I'm going to click on the console over here. And do remember, if you have questions, of course, feel free to ask your questions. But I know, and also as well, too, once the class finishes as well, too, if you have questions, you can feel free to ask. So over here, we're looking at the AWS cloud environment, just like we were seeing the Azure cloud environment just a second ago. You can see here, when it looks at it, it first tells me these are the recently, the recent cloud resources you've been playing with or you've been working with. I can see some of those things like our Lambda, our EC2, Elastic Beamwatch, the CloudWatch for monitoring, our developer tools like Code Deploy, Code Build, our resource groups that we're just seeing literally in Azure. So you can see in many cases, some of these things, they have the same name. They might operate slightly different, but in some cases, they're either having the same name, doing the same thing, or having the same name, operating slightly different, or operating almost the same way and having slightly different names. Over here, we can see other things such as what we call the identity access management, which boosts security in the cloud, manages and controls access. You can see our security hub, that is a security mechanism within the cloud. You can see other things like our WAF and our Elastic Container Services. So let us quickly shoot ahead and do something fun. I'm going to click on the services. Now, the services you're seeing right here is similar to what we were looking at in our Azure environment when we were doing what? When we were taking a look at our more services right here, where we had the categories. So someone has a question over here. So someone is asking, what is the difference between FinOps and DevOps? That is a very, very large difference. You understand? FinOps, I don't really have much business deeply with it, but that is financial operations. DevOps is development and operations. You understand? And DevOps is more or less a part of the cloud, but specifically focuses highly on the platform as a service part of the cloud. Now, this does not mean it cannot mess with the infrastructure part of the cloud, because if you start looking at infrastructure as code in terms of DevOps and the cloud, you are now looking at infrastructure at a high level and being able to use DevOps mechanism with different infrastructure as code tools such as Terraform, Bicep, and the rest to create resources that can be any resource in the cloud, including anything that is under infrastructure as a code or platform, infrastructure as a service or platform as a service. So FinOps and DevOps are two totally separate things, okay? But DevOps has some other areas in it that are very and highly related to DevOps, such as DevSecOps, which is development, security, and operations, which is considering security highly in DevOps operations while you're, working as a DevOps engineer. So hopefully that answers your question. Sure, no problem. You're welcome. So now that we look at the categories over here for the Azure cloud, and we can see a similar thing over here when we click services, I'm going to go into, again, you're going to see it, management and governance. You just saw it right here, management and governance. So we're going to go over there and click management and governance. I'm going to create a resource group over here. There are so many cool tools right here. I'm going to click our resource group and tag editor. And now once that is clicked, I can see I have a few resource groups over here, but that is fine. I'm going to create a new resource group. So over here, we have our tag-based resource groups. And just to quickly mention about tags, I think we're trying to almost mention or talk about it in the Azure cloud. I've just switched back to the Azure cloud. I do bear with me. I know how to switch very fastly within this environment. I'm just very used to it. So for example, if I click on this resource group right here, it has some tags. The tags are basically what we call metadata details that are broken down into key and value pairs to give our cloud resources meaning in the cloud. This meaning are mostly business-driven meanings. They can also be technical-driven meanings. From a technical standpoint, I can look at this and I can say, wow, no matter what is going on, this cloud resource is for a production environment. That is very important to someone from a technical perspective. What that means is that by not doing any investigation at all, this detail here can give me a great highlight about what's going on here. Think about it when you go to buy a home. You are standing outside, your realtor has just brought you in front of a home. Even before she says anything, you see something like a signboard or signpost that says for sale by so and so construction company or whatever. And it says 5 bedrooms, you can even say pool. So even before you even step into the house, you already have an idea of, some high level concept of the house. And that is pretty much an example of what is going on over here. We see the environment that lets me as a DevOps engineer or software engineer or as a quality assurance tester or business analyst, make me understand that, wow, this one is serious. That is a live environment. So for some of us who are new to the word environment production, in the software engineering, software development life cycle, DevOps, cloud field, we just mentioned like 4 or 5 fields right now in tech. There's something we call environments. The environment has to do with the significance of the item you're working on. So take, for example, if this item was a website that you're trying to deploy, right? Developers, if it's a brand new website, just think about threads. So hopefully some of us know threads, but let me scratch that out because I was in a class, actual real IT training class the other day saying threads, and half the people didn't know about it yet. So let's talk about Instagram. Instagram, let's assume Instagram has not existed yet. And then the guys, Mark Zuckerberg is like, I have an idea. Actually, I think Mark Zuckerberg, I can't even remember who was it. I think he bought it from someone, but that's another story. But whoever first started Instagram said, hey, you know what? We want to create Instagram. It didn't just come from nowhere, right? Developers wrote code. They pushed the code to an environment that is called a dev environment, which is development environment, which can be a live website. But this website is not accessible to the world. It's just internally within an organization. So they test it, they do some testing, they look, this is good. They now pass it to another environment that is called the staging or UAT environment. The UAT is an abbreviation. The full meaning is user acceptance testing. That's when the testers come in. The different individuals that are looking for a mess up within the code. So let me see if this code is failing or passing. Let me see, or rather, let me see if this application is functioning well. That environment is called UAT. Now, once that environment checks well, the UAT guy comes and said, I found 3 problems. He sends the problem details back to the developer. The developer says, I said, this guy giving me problem. He goes back, he writes the code, he fixes it, tests it, he sends it again to the UAT environment. The tester comes, checks it. Okay, great job, developer, you've done it well. We are good to pass this to production environment. Now, that production environment is the live environment. That is when Instagram goes live. And then the marketing has been coming, from some months or weeks or whatever the company strategy is. And then now it's live. And then you can now use it as an individual. And so that's what the environments are. They are the different processes that resources or applications or web apps, websites, all of these different things go through before they become live. Now, typically in an organization, it will be more than those 3. I just described 3 environments: development, UAT, and production. Typically, some company, like my company right now, they have like 6 environments: dev 1, dev 2, UAT, UAT 2, pre-prod, prod. Any company can customize their environments, but generally speaking, it's typically 3: the development stage, the testing stage, and the live stage. So that's what that is. And so that's what tags do. They give us a very good explanation of what's going on. So it's very, very important. Now, from the business perspective, people can also use this to know what to build different teams in the cloud environment. So here we see a cost center. So as far as this team follows due principle and they create resource and they choose the right cost center, somewhere within this Azure environment, either through a tool that is called cost management, as you can see it right there, or through other tools like our Azure subscription, I can then generate the bill to say, this team tagged this with this cost center, spent this much money, and I can send it to their manager. So tags are very, very important, both from a technical standpoint and a business standpoint. And they use the mechanism of what we call key value pairs. And what are those? The key and the value. Your name is this. Your birthday is this. Your gender is this. That is what key value means. All right. So with that in mind, let us jump in here. So over here, I'm going to first start by creating a tag-based resource type. This gives me a simple resource group creation without attaching it to an infrastructure. Over here, if I choose CloudFormation, I'm choosing to create a resource group with the intention of infrastructure as code, creating a cloud resource. So we're going for the tag-based. Now, one cool feature we have here within AWS is, well, what type of cloud resources do you want to put into this resource group? I can go ahead and say I want to put virtual machines in here. In AWS, they're called EC2s. So because I know what I'm looking for, I just type instance. That's what we call them, EC2 instances. And by typing instance, it tells me, okay, I got you. So I said, thank you. And I select that. If I wanted more, say I wanted to deploy an S3 bucket, which is an Amazon AWS storage, I click S3 too. It says select me. I said, yeah. But in this case, I'm saying, don't worry about all of this. I just need a virtual machine EC2 instance. Now we see our tags. So you understand why I gave us some minutes to explain that. It says, what kind of tags do you want to apply? Remember, we're looking at it over here. We could see some tags. I can even go within Azure here to click on tags. And I can see all the tags listed. If I want, if I so want, I can just delete any one of them or update it here. Once I've been done with the update, I just click apply and it updates. So we're going to put in some similar things here. We're going to put in department environment. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to click the add. I'm going to go ahead and add environment. Bad spelling. I'm going to go in here and say this environment is going to be production. And then the last one, I can just say resource type. I'm going to say I'm planning to put EC2 instances in here. And I can add that. So now what do I have? I have 3 resource group tags. One for the departments, one to describe the environment, and one for the type of resources I'm expecting to load up inside this resource group, which is like a digital folder. So the next thing, I'm going to scoop down over here. This will eventually make more meaning to us once we deploy some cloud resources and they become available within this resource group. But now I'm going to go over here. I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to say RSGRP. This is the name of the resource group, just like we have a name right here for this resource group called RG Sales This. In fact, let me just even go ahead and just copy this. I'm going to come back over here and use the same name here. It says give a description, which is optional. I'm going to say this resource group holds the sales department production EC2 instances for the US EC2 region. Yeah, just as an example for a description. Now, one key thing we must also realize in AWS is when you're working with AWS, you're also working with what we similarly saw in our resource group, which is our regions. If I go over here, everything is placed in a region, right? The region works with the location where the data center that manages this resource you are creating actually exists. In this case, you can see when these were deployed, they were deployed in the East US. In AWS, where do I have to check that? Right here. I see different regions. In this case, I'm using US East Ohio. This resource will be created in that region area. So I'm fine with that, so I'm going to leave it that way. Now, it also has what we call group tabs. Now, your group tabs here are optional, these group tabs. So they are slightly different from this right here because this can be used for high-level information. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to use this group tab to describe the owner of this project. I'm going to say owner is, this might be for a manager in an organization. I'm going to say Kelly Michelle. And then now that I have that in place, I can create the resource group. And now that is created. 3TG or 3T5YF. If I go to save the resource groups, I can see it right there. And I can even see the description provided. When I go into it, it is still empty. It just shows me all of the details. So let's do one last thing. I'm going to go ahead and deploy a virtual machine, or as in the case of AWS, they call it EC2 instance. Without deviating from this place, I'm just going to go to a different tab over here, click on my resources, and I'm going to go to the same compute that we can see within our resource, or rather within our Azure environment when I click on more services and see compute right here. What I'm trying to do in AWS, in Azure, if I want to do that, I click on virtual machine. In this case, it's called EC2 instance. I think I've probably said that now about 5 times, so that should stick. So I'm going to click on compute, and I'm going to click on what we call EC2. Now that I'm inside my EC2, I can see some high-level details. You can see it all spinning, trying to give me what's going on. You understand? I can see I have 3 virtual machine instances running. I can see I have 2 key pairs. I can see my load balancing, auto scaling in action. Few cool things. To the left here, I can see a lot of different features too. But I'm not going to spend too much time there for the sake of time. I'm going to click on launch instance. And now that I've launched my instance, I'm ready to start provisioning for my cloud resource. And so the very first thing I want to do is to give my virtual machine a name. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to call this. I'm actually going to first copy what I have for the other one. And I can just change it and I can just say EC2. I can say this is for the sales department, East US, all of these things. Then I can go here and say 01. Now what's going on over here? Rather than saying RSGRP or anything as an abbreviation for the resource group, I'm giving an abbreviation for the virtual machine. This way, when anybody looks at this name, they immediately know it's a virtual machine or an instance. They easily know the department, the region. They know the PR stands for production, so they know it's for production resource. It has a unique name that shares the name as the resource group. This way, if anybody is doing a large share or search, rather, someone is trying to search for resources, if they picked up this word, it will pick up similar resources together. It's like a naming convention, and it's quite sequential too. Why did I say that? Now I have 01 over here. So if I was going to create a second virtual machine or EC2 instance in that same resource group, I can just go there and put 02. And so that is how you can manage sequences within your cloud resources that are being put together within a resource group. And so I'm going to switch this back to 01. The next thing is trying to ask me, what is your Amazon machine image choice called AMI? What kind of operating system do you want? Mac, Ubuntu, Microsoft, see all of them, a lot. Some of the things we mentioned earlier in this class. Talked about Red Hat, we talked about Ubuntu, we talked about Microsoft. I'm going to say, give me Microsoft. I want a Windows computer. Now, when I select that, I can also see the option that has been selected. It's a free tier. So what that is telling me that what option I selected here, as well as all of these, are free to a certain level. That's very important. So now it's giving me the details of that AMI. That is good. Now I can come in here to choose the instance type. What is the instance type? This is me trying to choose the configuration for the computer, for the Windows computer, such as the memory, the RAM, and all of this cool stuff. You can even see some of those details there. Again, for this, I'm going to go for a free one. They have different names, such as the nano, the micro, the small, medium, and it goes on and on and on. So I'm going to go for this free one. There's a place where you can see the list of the instance types over here as well. Let's close that. So now that that has been selected, I also need a key pair value or a key pair configuration that would help me with securing my password when I'm ready to log into this computer. Because I already have some created, I'm going to select one of the ones I have created. In this case, I'm going to go for this one here. And then I'm going to scroll down a bit, and then I come to the network. Remember when we're talking about networking, right? This comprises some of the networking we're talking about earlier on in this class. So before I proceed further, just give me like 10 seconds. All right. So now the next thing we're going to do now, I can decide to start editing some of these things. But for now, this is just a simple example. So I'm just going to walk you through how we can go through some of these selections. If I wanted to, I can click on Edit. It exposes me to some of the configurations for networking. I can set the VPC, which we mentioned earlier on, the virtual private cloud, which in Azure is also called the virtual network. I can decide to go for a default or a non-default VPC. The difference, that is another story. You understand? The default is an already prepared VPC, which is like buying food that is already prepared versus you buying the raw actual food and preparing it. That will be the non-default. So we're going to go for one that's already prepared. So from that list, this is like an example I have in here of a non-default. It is not as easy as choosing this one. When you want to choose a non-default, you actually have to put together all of the things that is needed for that non-default VPC, such as configuring your route table, internet gateway, putting together the subnet associated with the VPC, you know, and some other cool stuff behind it. So for now, we don't have that much time. We're going to go for the defaults. Same thing goes for the subnet too. Based on this default, I'm going to select the subnet. It's an item that works within what we call the VPC. I'm going to assign myself a public IP so that I can easily use that public IP to log in to that virtual machine. I'm also going to need a security group. In our Azure, this was when we're talking about the network security group. Over here, it's simply called a security group. So I'm going to call this just a simple name, security group 1. And I'm going to come over here, copy this detail because the description here is trying to give what we took out. So I'm going to go over here and put that information there. Now it gives us some details such as when we want to connect to this virtual, because we're creating a computer. It's just a supercomputer, so they are called servers. Some of us already know this. The type of connection I want to use to connect to it is RDP. It's just a fancy name. It's called Remote Desktop Protocol. It uses an avenue or a port. It's like you're trying to charge your phone, right? You notice if you're in UK, back home, in a different country or in the United States, some of these things, they have different voltage, different types of plugs. So think about the port range like that. Some specific high-level types of networking need certain types of port address numbers. In the case of RDP, it's 3389. So we're going to leave that way. And then with that in mind, I'm going to leave all of these other settings. I'm going to look at the amount of virtual machines we need. I'm going to say 1 is okay. Now, we want to group this virtual machine under our resource group. And so one of the key things is we can set that up over here by adding additional tags. But I'm going to show you a much more different way to approach that. So with that in mind, we are ready to launch this. So I'm going to click on Launch Instance. And it tells us it's been succeeded. So we're going to click on this. And it takes us to that new virtual machine that has just been created. Over here, there are different features. If I click on this by clicking on it, and mind you, as it's doing all of this, to our left, it is under instances. So over here, we are looking at different details. So just stare at these details. You understand? This is a version of like, if we are back in Azure, and I was looking at one of the resource groups over here. Let's look for that. I'm just going to easily go to the management and governance, select resource group, and then we can jump into one of our resource groups over here, and I can select our app service. Remember, as you're displaying high-level information to us, this is what it similarly looks like in AWS, except in this case, we are looking at a virtual machine. And Azure here, we are looking at an app service resource. So take a look at that. This is the public IP needs, the private IP. This is something that is called the DNS, and a host of other cool stuff. It's showing us over here, this is a Windows operating system and all of that. Over here, we see some other features, such as if I want to refresh this, if I perform certain operations, if I want to check the instance state, let's say I want to stop the virtual machine or delete the virtual machine. I also see further actions over here, some of them basic, some of them complicated, such as our networking, our security, image, and template. So these are very important things. So you can see why this is important, even when we're looking at the different syllabuses, both for AWS and Azure. So with that in mind, I'm going to take a step back over here, jump into the instances, and there we see our instances amongst others. So you can see right now, it is telling us that it is initializing. You can see the name over there. So it is still setting it up. So we're just going to give it like a quick 1 minute while I grab a bottle of water. And then once it's ready, we're going to connect this. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat or get it prepared so that once I'm back, you can always ask that easily, okay? All right, I'm back. So it looks like our guy is too busy, and we're just going to refresh it a little bit. All right, so it looks like it's now thinking correctly, right? That's good. So now that it's in there, we're going to connect. To connect, we're going to use this connect button. Typically what will happen, because remember during the configuration, we did choose something we call RDP. So the RDP is probably still loading up right now. I would know because if I click the get password, I'll see how it acts. I'm going to click upload private key file to upload my private key that would help with the password. I'm going to go to downloads. I'm going to look for that key pair. Hopefully I still remember it. That is it right there. I'm going to upload it. I'm going to say decrypt. Oh, okay, so it looks like it's on track. So I'm going to copy that password. It's generated a password to me, courtesy of something we call our key pair. And then I'm going to download the remote desktop file. This is a way to communicate and log into the virtual machine. So let's hit that button. Boom, you saw that? It just downloaded the file for me. So I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to go to our desktop, or rather, I'm going to go to, second here, I'm going to go to the downloads. Then from here, I'm going to click on that. And that would open up an application for me to log in remotely into that virtual machine. So I see my username over here, and I'm going to paste in the password that was generated for us when we decrypted the password from our key pair. I'm going to hit that continue button. It's going to ask me for a certificate to continue. I'm going to accept that as well. And then just give it a few seconds for it to load up. Voila. Now I'm logging into what? The Windows computer that I just deployed. I created a resource group. We've not connected or associated our virtual machine with our resource group. We're going to do that very shortly. But then I started creating the EC2 instance. I provisioned it, and when my provisioning state was in order, I did what? I proceeded with the deployment. Deployment completed, gave it some time for the virtual machine to come together, initialize itself, and get ready. And then we connected remotely using RDP client, as well as a key value pair or key pair to decrypt the password to use as an admin to log into this virtual machine. And so there I have it, a computer. The funny thing about this is, why you're going to be doing a lot of this, as an organization or, within an organization or company. Imagine you wanted to quickly do something on a Windows computer, and you didn't have a Windows computer. You had a Mac, and something you had to do for 3 or 4 hours. You don't need to go buy a computer. You don't need to tell your brother or sister to borrow your computer. You just are looking at a computer right now that is a Windows computer that are just configured for free. However, if you leave it there for several days, it's going to wrap up some few money. You understand? So that's how you do it. And so with that in place, we can see that right now I'm looking at my Windows computer. Give it some minutes. Again, this is a free version, so it's a bit slow because the RAM, the random access memory for us, some of us understand a random access is not that large for this. You understand? So it, takes it a little bit of time to tick. So anybody in the organization can start using this computer for different things. The system administrators can use it. The software engineers and software developers can use it to test their environment. The software engineers and DevOps engineers can also deploy applications on this. For some of us who are already in my class, you've seen us do a lot of dangerous things inside a computer, inside our virtual computers. You understand? So I can access the internet, but we don't need all of these stories because we all know what a Windows computer is all about. So I'm going to close that, right? We'll leave that. And then because we're running out of time, we're going to close some of all this cool stuff. So we've seen how we do that. So now, before we round up, I want us to take a look at some other key items, right? We've got Terraform. It's hard for us to cover everything, okay? And, we're running out of time a bit. So let us jump back into our learning guide. I see someone asked a question. So someone says, can one dive into DevOps without first going? Definitely. So let me break this down, right? So, okay, and then let me see. So someone asks, can one dive into DevOps without first going through cloud solution or solution architect? And then what if one has a cloud basic background, like CP and CompTIA, private cloud? So I'm not really understanding that second part. That's fine. I'll try to figure out what you're saying. So the first one, can one dive into DevOps without first going through cloud solution? Definitely, because DevOps and cloud, even though they are interrelated, they are also two separate entities. In a simple way, it's like husband and wife, right? They are a team, but they're two different people at the end of the day. You understand? They can collide. If you have both of them, you'll be very dangerous. If you have DevOps, AWS, and Azure, you'll be completely dangerous. You'll be very good. You understand? However, it doesn't mean if you choose either one of them, you'll be good as well too, right? Think about it. I have a bachelor's degree is okay. Then having a bachelor's, master's, and PhD, that kind of combination. So you can be DevOps without even touching cloud at all. You would only notice that when you start working with DevOps in modern days, you start seeing the cloud because the cloud exists. And DevOps is all about deploying, monitoring, automating applications, as well as implementing infrastructure as code. And so you will start seeing yourself exposed to the cloud because majority of these things, when you're deploying them, they are no longer being deployed on-premise, like we talked about in the beginning. Majority of them are being deployed to the cloud. So you'll be deploying to the cloud, you'll be deploying to on-premise, because some organizations are still deploying things in on-premise, which is in the physical infrastructure environment. So you understand? So DevOps does not have to do with that, but then if you do DevOps very well, you see that you actually have to touch cloud a bit, but you don't need necessarily to touch cloud as deep as you would if you're a cloud solution architect, because the cloud solution architect's first priority is the cloud itself. You understand? So that's the difference between them. Trying to figure out the second question, what if one has a cloud basic background like CompTIA? So CompTIA can definitely help because that's networking. You understand? CompTIA would definitely help you. I'm not sure the CP thing, but CompTIA would definitely help you, especially within the cloud. You understand? When you're talking about security and networking, you're going to see CompTIA really coming. As well, too, if you're someone that's done a little bit of cyber security, you're going to see cloud security making sense for you. I've never seen it so magnificently done before. I have a lot of students that have come from cybersecurity. Not all of them have worked in the cybersecurity, but they've maybe done some training or something, and I'm just explaining things. They are okay, cloud practitioner. Oh, I see. Okay. So yeah. So with the CompTIA and cybersecurity field, you definitely have it much more easier, especially the advanced level in cloud computing. You figure it, especially when it comes to security and networking. Of course, with the cloud practitioner, definitely that helps you in DevOps. You understand? Anything that is because DevOps and cloud, they are like cousins. You understand? They are very, very, very close. That's why in my own training, I bring them together. I'm bringing them together because it's the right thing to do. It's not something that every other IT training people do. You understand? I just go a little bit further because for me, it's just not the training, it's a passion. And I want to really see people succeed. And that level of success comes from the part where if you do your own work, when you go online, you're going to be seeing job opportunities that are just beyond the cloud. Let's quickly take a look at that. So I know there are so many things we can touch over here, but let's take a look at that because I think I did open up that website just to show us. This is LinkedIn, for example. If I went to LinkedIn over here and I typed in Azure, because let's say I'm looking for Azure job, let's say in the United States, I search for it. We see 58,000 jobs. Now, majority of these jobs are cloud jobs. But then as you go on looking, you see some of them, they're more so looking for some DevOps opportunity. You understand? So some of them are focusing on the cloud and infrastructure. senior cloud engineer. You can even see me. This is me right here. This is where I started, right? Full stack developer. You understand? Comes in here. You can see how all of these things connect. Because as a full stack developer, the correct full stack developer, you definitely need a cloud environment. And that's where I started my own cloud journey for. Before I now fully become more 70% in the cloud and 30. I don't even write any code now. I'm a lead technical team lead. I just monitor what junior developers are developing, and I teach them the principles of coding correctly. I review their code as well too, you understand? While teaching them key principles like things we call test-driven development, repository patterns, domain-driven design, dependency injection, implementing security such as JSON Web Token into APIs, working with cross-cutting concerns such as testing, validation, I can just go on, error handling and the rest. You understand? So it's DevOps very important, because as we go down a little bit, I'm even surprised I've not seen yet. But you can see the data part I was talking about, Azure Data Architect. So they're looking for Azure, but they need some level of data. You can see Databricks right there. The same Databricks, if I go back in here and I go into our Azure cloud environment and I scroll to our syllabus, you're going to see Azure Databricks. So because I'm in the field, you understand? And my company, we actually interview people, you understand? So I know exactly what is going on in the resumes. I know what the recruiters are looking for. That is why I always tailor it. If today this becomes irrelevant, I'll throw it out. If a new thing becomes relevant, I put it in there, because I can track what is going on live in the cloud field, whether it's Azure, AWS, or DevOps. So this always changes. I might have trained someone from last year. When he looks at it, he'll be like, oh, this looks different. I say, yes, of course. I move with trend. I don't stay in old school levels. You understand? So that is how we structure. So hopefully that answered the question. That is how it's all set up. But that is a good question, because it did bring me back to this part. And this part is actually very, very integral. Someone tells me, I've been on the cloud job search for 2 years now with 2 certifications, but I was not able to get any job. I'm assuming I'm now trying hands-on finance. Well, to be honest with you, what is going on? Because I saw that when you mentioned it, you're not necessarily doing anything wrong, but there might be some things you're doing wrong. You understand? What is going on is, first of all, if you can mention there, if you're doing AWS or Azure, you understand? Or maybe it's even Google Cloud Platform. But what I want to tell you is very, very important. If you are focusing on certification, it is a very, very bad idea. I've seen people do it. I've been on some groups and say, I got my certification, it works. Nobody cares about certification. They only care about certification when you actually have a practical know-how. You understand? And that practical know-how comes from having a very strong, whether you're learning by yourself, doing self-learning, or you do a practical IT training, but it has to be practical. You understand? Where you're deploying things, you're going to see very, very complex projects. Even some of my projects, some students, when they do it, they sweat finish. I say it's that way because that's what you're going to meet in real life. You understand? That practical knowledge, you know how to put together your resume, right? But when you're putting that resume, it's because you know that you can do those work practically. Someone that focused on a certification will answer theoretical questions nicely. Tell me, what does a resource group do? They will say, tell me, what does this do? They say, if I put them in the front of the computer, I'll say, quickly configure a virtual machine skill set, load it on a load balancer, implement an Azure policy that prevents people from not being able to deploy this virtual machine skill set except they choose a 8 gig RAM. And while deploying it, add 3 additional data disks and then deploy this application. But while you do it, implement a network security group. Within that network security group, plug in a web server application security group, configure this inbound, configure that outbound, deploy that. Once that's been deployed, log in. Before you log in, first configure the DNS. Before you do that, implement Bastion. I don't want you to log in through RDP. Log in through Bastion. Once you've done that, deploy IIS. Now, when you're inside it, launch Server Manager, and then with this Server Manager, launch a disk pool, configure 2 new disks of 250 gig each, and then even cut it into 2 half. Don't release all the 250 gig. Release 150. That person will just be confused because they've not done the practical training. So they can speak the speak, but it will be hard to do the do. You understand? So having that practical IT training is very, very, very important. You understand? Because the certification is supposed to support a practical knowledge or work experience. You understand? The advantage of having the practical experience is that, like a practical IT training, is that it exposes you to what you would most likely face yourself to. You understand? Into if you want to do practical training, I start my own practical training because I just saw your question, how do I get the practical training? There are two ways, right? If you can do self-learning, that is very, very hard. You understand? If you can do that, that's fine. If you want to join my IT training, I start my new IT training, I believe it's on September 2nd. As you can see my screen over here, September 2nd. And depending on the kind of thing you want to sign up for, you can even see right here, you can see the cost right here, right? If you want to do just Azure track or AWS track, I recommend Azure track because that's where majority of the jobs are right now. You understand? If you now want to get both of them, the price goes up first. If you feel like you are very new and you're a bit scared, man, I'm not all about you paying a lot of money. If you feel like you just want to handle one, then you just go for the Azure track or the AWS track first. You understand? And then you can expand from there. If you feel you can handle both and you don't want to be going back and forth, then you can do both together. When you do both together, I focus more on Azure because that's really where most of the opportunities are with the Fortune 500 companies. And then I bring you 50% into AWS. You understand? Two reasons for that, because you don't want to blow your head up. You understand? You want to be on track, and then that will be much more easier. So that is how you get into that kind of practical training. We do practical hands-on. Some of the guys that are here know me, I can show you. If I go down here, you're going to be seeing different students. If I look at this particular person over here, you see me communicating with her, you're going to see if this loads up, you're going to see me score. If the person does not do well, you understand? You're going to see the score there. In other cases, some people did well. If I look at some other people, there's just so many people. You understand? There are people that scored 100% right there in their work. I forget where that is. You understand? So that's, you see them, there are a lot. You get what I mean? So my classes are hands-on. If I scroll down, I start looking at, you can see people that are sending me the screenshot. I'm looking at that screenshot, and based on that, I'm giving them what? Their score. So that is pretty much how it's set up. So let me take a look at this. So example, you can see this one. How I'm giving them the task: create the enterprise application, create the new users, configure the authentication method and rules, deploy a virtual machine. You understand? Assign the task user. You can see the assignment, so it's not a play. By the time you do this, I'm basically giving you industry level assignments, so that when you do it and you observe what you've done, you already have that practical knowledge. You are not speaking theoretically. You're not going into a car and someone is saying, how do I steer that wheel? You are talking because you know how to drive. You've been driving for 4 or 5 years. That is the purpose of this. And these are weekly. There's no class you want to see. And all my classes, they are all recorded. So you can always go back to go and learn anything that you've not missed out. I'm also on Udemy. I also give my students free access to Udemy if they pay for a full training, so that way in the future, because it's a lifetime access, you can always access it there. If you want to just jump into one specific item through my Udemy course, you can just go there. Oh, I can't remember how we did this 3 months ago. Let me go and see. You'll be able to do that. All right. So that's how to do it. If you want to reach out to me, I'm going to quickly share my phone number over here on the chat, so that if you want to send me a message, either on text message or WhatsApp, you can do that if you're interested in a full training. Sorry, I have fun with this so much that sometimes I forget to tell some of this critical point. So you can do that. If you want to go to my website, which I was just showing you a few seconds ago, you can do that as well. And that website will be this right here, scoutstacksolution.com. Of course, if you want to follow me on Instagram as well too and send me a message, we are available everywhere. You can do that as well. So that'll be instagram.com/scoutstack_solution. All right, so many ways to get in touch with me. So I've shared that information in the chat. So if you want to do that, so that's just the problem. You understand? The certifications is meant to boost your theoretical knowledge, because the same thing can happen too. You can be practically good, and someone asking you to define something theoretically, generally, you're like, but that person that has the practical knowledge, you easily get a job. You understand? Because he knows the practical work. And when you know what you're doing practically, you can literally write it on your resume. When you write it on your resume, once you know what you know, you're going to defeat any recruit. If you don't know it, because some recruiters will be asking for things that are even outside the Azure space. What you don't know, you don't care about it. Because majority of the time, the people that are going to ask you for what you need are the things that fall within the AWS, Azure, or DevOps environment. You understand? So hopefully that answered your question. But the only thing with that is the practical training. That's why when I just saw it, I just knew what was going on. Do you understand? So yeah, sure, no problem. You're welcome, Princess. So that's just what is going on over there. Okay. So practical training is very, very, very important. For you to get into the Azure or AWS field. So over here, we're going to look at Terraform, and I'm going to have to cover this in the next class. This is typically a documentation I share with my students because Terraform can be used in different forms, either through an online repository such as Azure DevOps or GitHub, or through Visual Studio Code. I already had my Visual Studio Code already. Yeah, it's just we don't have the time. But again, like I said, some of the students that are here in this class that have been with me, they already know this. They've done this already, done and dusted. You understand? So that is just what the Terraform. But be on the lookout for my next webinar, perhaps within another 3 weeks to 1 month, and then I'm going to try and cover some of these areas we didn't cover. There's still a lot more fun stuff. Before we wrap up, and I forget, if I go back over here, we can see in Azure, we are seeing about 58,000 jobs. If I switch that, so just remember that number, 58. If I switch that to AWS, let's see what happens. Oh, wow, this is actually surprising, except, let me see. So I think AWS is now up again. Because back, when I used to show people this, AWS was a little bit low on the numbers. I think I've even shared this with my WhatsApp group. So this looks like a very, very good number. You understand? Now, of course, it's not everything you're going to see that is AWS, but in one way or the other, they are all interconnected. You understand? So as you go down, you're going to be seeing some different names like senior. It's just at some place they'll just mention AWS. You understand? And that number will come up that way. So, but if you look at all of the different websites, like we're on Dice right now, Dice is another good website for you to find your jobs. Monster.com is another good one. Those are the top 3 I recommend. Monster, Dice, LinkedIn, and then maybe Indeed and Glassdoor. All right. So in this case, if you go to Azure over here, click that. So over here, you can see the numbers are a little bit relative. There are other key things to put in, but the easiest is to put in things like AWS and Azure. That will boil it down to any job position that has AWS or has Azure within it. Okay. Now, this is my website. If you want to get the details of each training within my website over here, let's see, where's the website over here? You can, once you're on my website homepage, you can click on the View Our IT Trainings. To just keep the whole line of information. There's a whole lot of details over here. I think if you go up over here, you're going to see some of the students in the past. I need to update this with some of my new students once they've gotten their job. These are students in different fields I've taught in who have gotten a job. And, I just ask some of them for their permission. They're like, oh, that's fine to add me there. I put them on there. So the trainings are now $160. It's about 11 weeks, but there's a 12th week, additional 12th week to provide you with a resume, go over the resume with you, also prepare a mock interview for you. I love to do that because I need to have you prepared for your cloud job. You understand? And you need to test yourself too. Sometimes it's hard to test yourself one-on-one. It's not hard for me. I've done a lot of practice years ago. You understand? But I can have you. It's going to be a theoretical and a practical interview, which they're going to be theoretical questions I'll throw to you. They're going to be practical questions that you do in front of me as well too. Now, because I understand students might need to study another extra 1 or 2 weeks after their training, I can always reschedule that for you, right? But those are the things I offer after the training. Give you a resume template so you know how to set up your resume, give you that on-the-job support for 2 to 3 months, as well as help you with your resume, and then give you all of the deeper scopes on how to apply, how to talk to your recruiters and things like that. So pretty cool and interesting process, for the students. You would enjoy it. This is an Azure DevOps environment. Again, we can't cover this. This is a DevOps environment, right? Where we have things like online repositories that I talked about, where we could see code just as we were seeing it in GitHub, and then we can see other things like what we call pipelines. We can see other things. We can see there's a lot of pipelines over here. We can see different environments. You remember we talked about environments earlier. You can see some of them for the DevOps CI/CD pipelines. Then you can see certain releases over here to pretty cool releases. If I click on this release 5, you can see as a DevOps engineer, when you deploy your code and you put all your artifacts together, as well as creating your pipelines, then you can create your release pipeline as well, and then you can start deploying to different environments. Remember when I told you in some organizations, they can have more than one environment just beyond the prod. You can see prod master, prod 2 master, UAT, all right? So there's a lot of fancy things that go on within the Azure the Azure AWS and DevOps field, okay? So we're going to be wrapping up over here. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to me. I've shared my number over there. I've also shared my website. Finally, I'm just going to share my email in case anyone is interested in grabbing that. These classes are always fun. Sometimes I want to teach much more advanced stuff, and I've done that in the past. It's just a lot of people got confused. You understand? Because this thing takes step. You understand? It's taking a step 1. Typically like an eight layer step 1 to 8. You understand? So it's always good to walk us through step 1 and 2. Today we just kind of looked at like step 1 to 3 in a way. You understand? Which is pretty cool. And as you can see, I'm very sure most of us were just focusing and enjoying the class, and that's pretty much how it goes. You understand? Now, if you get to level 7 or 8, it might be slightly hard, but you don't even have to worry about that. Even if you pick from level 1 to 6, it's good enough. You understand? So that is the background and how everything looks like. All right. So hopefully everyone enjoyed the class. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to me. Okay, and be on the lookout for any our next webinars. You understand? And be sure to join it if you want to learn more, okay? Thanks, everyone, for joining. I saw everyone was in place. Nobody left. Everyone is here standard and enjoying the class. So hopefully it was not a lot of knowledge dumped. Try to just give us basic information just because that's how it should be, once you're learning about something, Yeah, sure, no problem. You're welcome. Thanks, Princess, and everyone. Appreciate it. All right. So you guys have a very nice night. Until we meet again, stay blessed. Okay. Thank you.